So that you mean that, that because there is the threat of involuntary commitment...
The threat and the entire history of the threat and the reality of the threat.
Well then, if I can just shift
it's
the ground...
It's not an empty threat.
No, but if I can shift the ground slightly and say, there are nevertheless the problems of helping the apparently helpless, the agonized, the distressed, and those who are not merely agonized and distressed themselves, but those who agonize and distress their relatives, who, for reasons of their madness, whether you call it illness or not, are not in a position to offer themselves as plaintiffs in the way that a patient suffering from physical disease is able to do. What do you do on the basis of philanthropy, on the basis of helping in terms of kindness about such people? While I agree with you wholeheartedly that there is always the threat of the tyranny of the involuntary commitment, of simply taking away someone's liberty merely because you have denominated them one way rather than the other, what do you do about those people who in fact are, for reasons which we needn't discuss, either because of brain disorder or something else, some existential disorder, have become mad, and mad in a way which renders them incapable of asking for the help which, in fact, a profession might be able to give?
What do we do about this? Well, we can have a conversation about this, obviously, and your question is again, well taken, and I would like to say all sorts of things about this and will, but again, let me first say that this is precisely why psychiatry is so powerful, because it is so useful. I love to paraphrase Voltaire, saying that if there were no God, we would have to invent him. Well, if there were no psychiatry, we would have to invent it, because psychiatry, in fact, comes in and does something in these existentially, humanly, very, very difficult situations. Now, whether it is as good a thing as we could possibly do or not is debatable. Obviously, many people think it's the best we can do, and in some situations, it may be the best thing we can do. Now, in some ways, we have to break down the kind of phenomenon which you described, because, first of all, you emphasized the helplessness, the inability of the patient to act as their own agent seeking help. Now, if we really take that seriously, you see, that does not characterize the whole panoply of the situation. But that is certainly one part of the group that you're talking about. To the extent to which people behave that way, there is no great problem and there is no great conflict between my views and those of traditional, ordinary, regular psychiatrists. Because these persons then should be treated more or less on the model of someone who has been hit by a taxi and is unconscious. The ordinary channels of medicine, science, compassion, and humanity should be mobilized, and this person should be cared for and treated in whatever way makes sense to society, scientifically and humanly. There's no great problem.
No, I see that.
But Dr. Miller, you know very well that this is a minute problem, because what happens very often is, and there are such people, is that although they are helpless in many ways and don't seek help, the one thing they seem to want to know and want to do is to get out of a mental hospital as soon as they are taken there. That's why they are locked, so that the people can't walk out. So although they don't quite know what to do with themselves, they do know they don't want psychiatry. Now, but this is not really a representative sample. Let's take, I love to take, so that we can be a little more concrete, some literary examples of these cases. Why is this so distressing? Who is a typical mental patient? Lady Macbeth. Now, what's wrong with her? That finally, the Macbeths make it to the top, and her illness has a characteristic that upsets her husband. He can't have a good time because she's so depressed. Well, this is a very difficult problem, but why is she so depressed? As a doctor, that's 400 years ago, the doctor knows why she's depressed, because she's guilty. It's a moral problem. The doctor says this is not a medical problem. But precisely what the doctor in Macbeth says is not a medical problem is what doctors now say is a medical problem. So this is a jurisdictional question. Now, if you want to make it a medical problem, it is indeed possible to do things to Lady Macbeth so that Mr. Macbeth feels better. I don't think this is good. Now, but this is, honest people can have an honest disagreement about this. Now, psychiatrists say, but after Lady Macbeth gets electric shock, so she'll be grateful that she got the electric shock. Now, that doesn't prove anything, of course, morally or empirically.
Well, what
This
would
is medicalization of morality. That's what we are talking about.
So then, in that case, what do you feel ought to be the repertoire of what's on offer to those people who are, in fact, exhibiting either very florid and peculiar and distressing mental symptoms or mental, well, let's not, perhaps it's begging the question to say mental symptoms, but florid disorders of behavior, florid disorders of thought, which are distressing either to them or to their relatives?
I would, first of all, I would have to separate those two categories radically. Those are two entirely different populations, sort of like what do you do with people with pneumonia and with people with cancer of the breast? Well, you know, they have to go through separate doors into different buildings, as it were. Now, people who upset other people, as far as I am concerned, in this way, schizophrenia, depression, the patient, as it were, there is a person who is disturbed, the relative. It is for them to decide what they want to do. The upsetting person should be left alone as long as they do not break the law. Primum non nocere. First of all, do no harm. I think it is medically, morally incorrect to take some action against this person without his consent. Well, now, if he consents, then there is no problem.
No, but I'm trying to indicate a type of patient who is not simply obstreperous. He's not causing distress to his relatives because he makes their life distressing.
Give me an example.
Well, I'm talking about the transformation of a personality in such a way that the relatives, the parents, the siblings say, not, please cure my brother, sister, or father because they are making our life appalling, but please cure them
because... People never say that.
No, but I'm paraphrasing what they would say. But please restore to us the person whom we love. Not please make them less obstreperous, please make them less insulting, less disgusting, but we would like back the lovable person who we have been associated with all our lives.
Dr. Miller, in all, with all my effort, and without trying to appear difficult about this, I can't deal with that because a relative who would speak like that would in some way deny the complexity of human existence. How about Jekyll and Hyde? I mean, again, I would, since you haven't given a more concrete example, let's take a concrete example. Here was a nice young woman, wonderful daughter, and she gets to be 15, 16, she stops eating. She's anorexia nervosa. And the family says, give us back this wonderful, you know, girl who was such a nice girl, and you know, she ate, everything was all right with her. Now she doesn't eat.
Yes, well, indeed. Well, I mean, but isn't that a perfectly legitimate and reasonable request?
No, it's not. Because it denies all the reasons why this young woman doesn't eat, which from her point of view are just as good as why somebody in Ireland doesn't eat because he is a political hunger striker.
Oh, no, but there is surely a fundamental distinction there in that there may well be reasons why the patient suffering from anorexia nervosa is in fact deliberately abstaining from food in a metaphorical sense, similar to the way in which the prisoner in the H block is abstaining from food. He's trying to get some sort of deal. But at least in the case of the H block, the conditions which would satisfy the calling off of the strike are clearly known. They're on the table. Surely what in fact is distinctive about the anorexic patient is that even if in fact it could be demonstrated that this was a strike on behalf of some sort of settlement that they were trying to obtain, it's almost impossible for anyone other than an expert, perhaps a medical expert, to elucidate and find out what the deal is. What deal would in fact get them to call off the strike?
Not so. Excuse me for being so direct. This is a very nice dichotomy in a way, because in the case of the Irish hunger strikers, nothing about their motivation and their goal structure is repressed. Our society can tolerate perfectly well that a Gandhi or an Irish hunger striker, who he is and why he starves himself and what he wants. But our society collectively denies that there are people, generally young people, who, during adolescence, have only one overriding goal, and that is not to grow up. That we can't tolerate. We call it schizophrenia. That's too painful. And secondly, we can't tolerate that there are some young women who can't tolerate the idea of becoming women because they think women are second-class citizens, which of course they are destined to bear children, which they may not want to do, and so forth. So in effect, the deal that these young women want is of course not a political deal. It's a more subtle existence. They rebel existentially and biologically, and we are not therefore prepared to hear it, much less to meet their demands.
But nevertheless, what you have is a situation, so as regards the family, a painful and apparently eventually leading to a fatal outcome of the loss.
But it's not a fatal outcome.
Well, it may be a fatal outcome.
No. Now, look, you are in the language, you are in the word business. When you talk about the fatal outcome, it sounds like cancer. What we are talking about is a young woman who prefers suicide to growing up as a woman. Now, in 1400, she might have been called a saint. There were lots of people who preferred dying for God or something than living.
Well, that would presumably...
This is suicide. Now, so this raises the whole question of suicide. Our society denies the legitimacy of suicide.
Well,
it's mental illness.
Well, it may... I'm
not advocating suicide.
No, but it may not go as far as denying the legitimacy of it, but one can understand relatives who, in fact, would prefer it not to take place and say, please... do something to persuade our daughter not to kill herself.
But relatives may also prefer somebody for a nice young Jewish boy not to convert to Catholicism, or marry a Catholic girl, or get a divorce. Now we are talking about what people in a family would prefer one of their members not to do. That's not a disease. Let's take concrete examples. Let's assume that somebody's father is an Orthodox rabbi, and the son comes home and wants to only have ham sandwich for lunch.
All right, well, I'll accept
instead
that.
Instead of anorexia nervosa. Is that a disease too?
Well, in that case, to whom do they go in order to...
That's their problem. I am just trying to bring order to this psychiatric chaos. I don't have an answer for life's problems. I only know stupid answers when I see them.